You might not feel hip thrusts in your glutes much, but I guarantee we'll find you a bridging and hip thrust variation that you do. Squats may feel awkward for you, but we're gonna find one that feels normal. Maybe back squat, high bar or low bar or front squats don't feel good for you, but maybe heels elevated goblet squats feel good for you, or maybe box squats feel good for you. We're gonna find a deadlift variation. You know, maybe you don't like deadlifts, conventional deadlifts from the floor, but maybe you like sumo deadlifts with a kettlebell or block pulls or some type of variation. And we can always find one. Everyone, and I always say this, not every body was built to squat or deadlift or hip thrust or lunge or whatever, but there is a variation for you that we can usually find that works fine. And if there's not, then just omit it, because you'll see your best results over time when you're not in pain, because pain inhibits muscle activation, and when you keep just going through the motions and grinding and grinding and grinding, it beats you up over time. So, and being 42 years old now I realize the importance of that now, because I'm starting to get little injuries and stuff, and weightlifting is starting to take its toll on me, so I have to learn the joint friendlier variations for my body, and it's different for everyone.
Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Joovv.com, the leaders in at-home light therapy devices that can optimize your collagen production, skin health, even enhance soft tissue injury recovery, and my personal favorite, optimizing testosterone and hormone levels naturally. Now, I know you're thinking, how can light do all this? There's a long story that I'll leave links below where you can learn a little bit more about it, but the mechanism of action is called photobiomodulation. It's really unique, really cool, and a lot of people that listen to this channel, a lot of people have reached out to me that have purchased the devices. I've shared my before and after blood work. This stuff really works if you do it consistently. So please go to Joovv.com. That's JOOVV.com/Mike. You can see my blood work before and after results and hear testimonials from individuals who have purchased the devices and use this at home, which, by the way, they have travel devices, which I personally use, called the Joovv Go, and they have a 6-panel big version called the Joovv Quad Elite, which I recommend as well. That's what we have in our home. We've been using it for the past year and a half. So I hope you check it out, and I hope you enjoyed this show, and let's dive back into it.
Bret Contreras, thanks so much for coming on High Intensity Health. Great to be with you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. I've been following your work for quite a while on Instagram, and I love that you talk about, training the whole body and muscle as well, but there's a lot of good research about when we activate our glutes, when we activate our quads, it affects our metabolic rate and insulin sensitivity. How did you get to become the glute guy? You started sharing research right after your PhD? I mean, how did that?
No, it was much before that. So I guess you could say this started off in high school. I'll tell you two quick stories. One, I was sitting by two girls that I had a crush on, and I was overhearing them talking about, let's go watch football practice. I love watching the guys in their football outfits. I love staring at their butts, and I'm like, great, if glutes are important, then I'm gonna be a 40-year-old virgin, because I had none. Yeah. I mean, my back went right into my legs. And so the next story, I'm playing golf with my sister's boyfriend, and I remember on the 9th hole getting ready to swing, and he's like, Bret, your butt goes right into your legs. It's like you're missing the set of muscles there, the gluteal muscles that are responsible for creating this protuberance, and you're just a straight line. And I was actually impressed by his ability to be so descriptive, and I'm like, way to talk so freely about my biggest insecurity. And I remember I was around 16, and I went home and I was like, I'm not okay with this. Mm-hmm. I have to figure out a solution to this. I don't want to go through life with no glutes. And why can't there be an exercise that I felt when I do push-ups, I feel my pecs. Why can't there be like a push-up for the glutes? Because when I do squats, I feel it in my quads. And when I do deadlifts, I felt it all in my back. I wasn't using good form, but I didn't know that at the time. And ironically, years later, I kind of did invent the push-up for the glutes. I invented the barbell hip thrust. But anyway, when I was 19 years old, my cousin bought me this book, The Complete Guide to Butt and Leg Development, and for Christmas. And I was like, wow, this is so cool. Why'd you get me this? He goes, because I've never met someone so obsessed with glutes. And that was 23 years ago.
That's amazing.
And my enthusiasm for the glutes has never waned. It's never diminished. I'm still just as excited today as I was back then, but it's just been this constant, quest for maximizing my understanding. So back then, all I could do was read. Back when I was 16, all I could read is fitness magazines. That's all we had then. And then over time, the internet came out. So it was like finding the right websites to. And back, I first just studied what bodybuilders did. Then I started studying what strength coaches did and athletes from various disciplines. And then I even started studying what like the Jane Fonda type workouts and it's kind of been tying all that together. Like, let's take these exercises that are really good. How can we make them more challenging with bands or ankle weights or extra range of motion or load? And so my system has just evolved, and then culminating in a PhD. And my PhD is pretty much in glutes. My supervisor loved all the stuff I was interested in, so I just got a free ticket to study whatever I wanted. And I kind of looked at squats and hip thrusts and their differences and their effects on performance and glute growth and things like that. And the nickname Glute Guy actually came from my friend Martin Rooney. I was at a seminar and he's like, we were talking for about an hour on glutes, and he goes, "You should call yourself something. You should be named the Glute Guy." And I'm like, I like it. So.
It stuck with you. But I've heard you on other podcasts, Jeff Nippert. I mean, you love muscle in general. I mean, the delts, the bicep, everything. So it's hard to kind of separate. But it seems that at least for...
Real quick, I'll interrupt you.
Go ahead.
That's kind of a... So I know I'm so lucky to have this niche.
Sure.
I'm the glute guy. And so, and it's good for business to have a niche. Mm-hmm. But the only drawback is people consider you just like a one-trick pony. And I'm like to, I love everything. I love powerlifting. I love, track and field. I love sprinting. I love biomechanics. I love every exercise. You'll never hear me say, you should never do this exercise or this exercise. I like to study what makes it unique and how to optimize it and where it is useful in a program. And I just love resistance training. I love being in the gym. I love reading research. I love it all. I love talking shop with colleagues. And that's how, in my opinion, how you maximize your understanding. Because for me to be a glute expert, I need to know about hypertrophy. Mm-hmm. I need to know a lot about physical therapy because they're very important in rehab, things like that. And you can't you have to study a lot of different fields to really be an expert in your one area.
Totally. No, it's good to have kind of like the beginner's mindset, right, when approaching different things. So I'm like you, I think, is it the femur length that kind of governs, like if you're squatting, for example? When I squat, I really don't, unless I go really wide and like really focus on sitting in the hole, that I activate my glutes. So is there different body types that may respond more favorably to a squat versus hip thrust when it comes to activating the glutes?
Yes, and I don't even know, things like femur length will affect the way your squat looks. So, like, I tend to turn my squats into a good morning when I go really heavy or when I rep to failure. I am stronger when I shoot my hips up out of the hole. And, I mean, I've done a 405-pound good morning, and my best squat is 455.
Wow.
So you can see at any point in time, I can just say I'm struggling, I can just lean. Mm-hmm. Well, why is that? Number one, I'm a tall guy and I have pretty long femurs, but also my quads, like you can see, I do not have nice quad development. I work my quads so hard, but I will never have giant quads. And it's funny because you can also look at my calves and they're huge, and I never work calves. But people they'll say, just do leg extensions every day, or do front squats twice a week, 5x5, or I've tried everything. I'm getting a hack squat machine delivered today. I'm on a quest to build my quads, but everyone has a weak muscle. So if your quads aren't that strong, it's funny because I read all these squat experts and biomechanics experts try and tell why you shoot your hips up out of the hole. And it's quad strength. And I hear them go, it's upper back strength, it's glute strength. No, it's quad strength. Trust me, because I have small and weak quads. And they'll say, but you're performing knee extension. Mm-hmm. Think about it. When you shoot your hips up, you're performing knee extension, but you're not bringing your torso with it. You're dumping the bar forward, so it's unloaded. Yeah. You could take 1,000 pounds and just dump it off of you. You're extending the knees and then lengthening your hamstrings and then kind of performing a good morning. So I know I'm not answering your question, but I will. So in that instance, femur length affects how you squat because you're going to have to lean a little bit more because your femur length is going to determine your hip plus knee extension torques with a given load, because it's the sum of those torques from the distance away from the line of the center of mass or whatever, so system center of mass. But anyway, so people who have longer femurs will longer relative femurs. It's not just the length of your femurs, it's relative to the rest of your body. But also things like ankle mobility. If you don't have good ankle mobility, you're going to lean forward more. That's why squat shoes help people stay more upright. And then what you said, when you go wide, it lets you stay a little more upright and go deep, and you feel your glutes more. Now, anatomy, we've just been talking about femur length and ankle mobility and hip anatomy, because some people can't, like me, if I go really wide, I can just get to parallel. I can't go much deeper. So it can impact, that's how those impact biomechanics. But how do they impact glute activation, assuming glute activation is related to hypertrophy, which obviously it is, but you can't just slap an electrode on someone and be like, this gets you 12% higher EMG, so it's going to get you 12% more muscle growth. It doesn't work that way. It's more complex. But obviously, if I take a bunch of different squat styles and use the same range of motion and the same relative load, the one that activates your glutes the best, with other things being equal, that'll be the best for your glute development. But it's all over the place. I don't think it's just related to anatomy. It's just, or we just don't know enough yet. I can tell you, because I've probably taken 100 different clients and taken them through extensive EMG experiments where we do everything. And some of my clients get, my client Sammy, she got way higher glute activation with a 50-pound goblet squat than she did with a 205-pound back squat.
Seems like it wouldn't make sense, right? The goblet would be more quad.
But not everyone's like that.
Wow.
But maybe it's something about holding the load near your center. That same client got more glute activation with a 106-pound kettlebell deadlift than a 225-pound barbell deadlift. But it's centered for her. Some people get their highest glute activation with a Zercher squat. But then again, the load is very centered. Some people get when you publish research, you publish averages. So if I take 10 people, and we look at front squats versus back squats, it'll probably average out. Now, there's different studies on this. Some show advantage with front squats, others don't. My study didn't. But you will find individuals, and that's what's nice about conducting research. I've been lucky enough to publish some studies and publish some original research. And when you do that, you'll see this individual. Like, Mike, maybe you have way higher glute activation when you front squat compared to when you back squat. But I have not found out any correlation like with femur length or anything like that. So either it's just this law of randomness and individualization, or we just don't know enough yet to know. But bottom line of what I'm trying to say here is no one can tell you, here's your exact anatomy, here are your proportions, this is going to be the best type of exercise for your glutes or your quads or this. You have to learn it through experimentation in the gym, through trial by error, through paying attention. And that's what all bodybuilders do. I grew up reading bodybuilding mags, and they'd all pay close attention. That's why it was fun to read their columns. They'd give you ideas to try. When I tweak this exercise in this manner, when I turn my feet out, or I do this, just tweak it a little bit by doing this, I feel it a lot more in this muscle. And that's what we have to do as bodybuilders if we're trying to sculpt the body. If you're trying to succeed in powerlifting, it's different.
Right.
You're not trying to work muscles, you're trying to maximize your strength and force production, and that's different than trying to, but the two kind of go hand in hand. in some ways, which is a whole other question though.
Sure. No, that's a great point. And I think basically what you inferred right there is people need to have the open mindset to customize things. And what I see happening is we have an Instagram celebrity or a fitness celebrity, right? People go to the gym, they do the same exact exercises trying to like work whatever that body part is, but like you said, it could be foot placement, it could be how upright your chest is, whatever. So is that something that you try to teach people, is like have an open mind to like tweak things?
That's our main thing that we do here. You might not feel hip thrusts in your glutes much, but I guarantee we'll find you a bridging and hip thrust variation that you do. Squats may feel awkward for you, but we're gonna find one that feels normal. Maybe back squat, high bar or low bar, or front squats don't feel good for you, but maybe heels elevated goblet squats feel good for you, or maybe box squats feel good for you. We're gonna find a deadlift variation. Maybe you don't like deadlifts, conventional deadlifts from the floor, but maybe you like sumo deadlifts with a kettlebell or block pulls or some type of variation. And we can always find one. I always say this, not every body was built to squat or deadlift or hip thrust or lunge or whatever, but there is a variation for you that we can usually find that works fine. And if there's not, then just omit it, because you'll see your best results over time when you're not in pain, because pain inhibits muscle activation, and when you keep just going through the motions and grinding and grinding and grinding, it beats you up over time. So and being 42 years old now I realize the importance of that now, because I'm starting to get little injuries and stuff, and weightlifting is starting to take its toll on me, so I have to learn the joint friendlier variations for my body, and it's different for everyone. Some people doing a neutral grip fixes everything. Some people should use dumbbells and not barbells. Some people should, it's just that's the number one thing about lifting for life, lifting long term, is finding the variations and exercises that work best for you. And we don't know enough about it to teach people how to customize it. To be able to, maybe I can envision one day in like 30 years, you go in and get a scan of your body, and we can look at your exact shoulder anatomy and both the bones and the muscular attachments, and we can say, ooh, based on this, you're not going to do good with, any behind the neck press or something, but if you go neutral grip, then it's going to work very well for your shoulder joint and your hip joint. Based on your anatomy, wide stance stuff is not going to work good for you. You need narrow stance stuff, or this guy needs wider stance with his feet flared out, and you shouldn't be going so deep. You can go deep. One study looked at 200 hips, when they looked at hip extension and hip flexion range of motion. So when you squat deep, you need good hip flexion range of motion. Well, the range between 200 hips was 80 degrees and 140 degrees. Wow. So there's a 60-degree spread there. So the guy who, I'm assuming was a guy, because a lot of women tend to have better hip mobility. But anyway, the guy with 80 degrees can't even, he has to do half squats. If he does a parallel squat, he'll butt wink, and then get more of his range of motion will come from just rounding the lumbar spine and posterior tilting the pelvis. But the person with 140 can squat ass to grass as deep as can be and be just fine and still keep a solid arch in their low back. So how do we and then hip extension range of motion, the spread was 5 degrees to 40 degrees. So that's hip hyperextension. So imagine doing a hip thrust. You come up to full hip extension. You don't want to go higher, because then you're just arching the back. So you stop at neutral. Well, one guy's neutral is at 5. Another, probably a girl, she's at 40 degrees, so she can keep going up. You'd actually probably think she's hyperextending her spine, when actually it could just be hip hyperextension. And we don't have, so anyway, you need to know these things as a trainer, and then it helps you understand that, well, this person has a lot or a little of this range of motion, and that determines your exercise, not your exercise selection, but your exercise variations. I know I worked with a strongman, and I also know a very successful Highlands Games athlete who just couldn't go deep. But they were this guy was the #1 Highlands athlete, and they just couldn't go that deep. But that doesn't mean you're not
activating the muscles, or
yeah. He had big glutes, he had big muscles, he was very functional. Obviously, the #1, the Highlands games, they do all these like
strongman.
It's like throws and strongman type stuff, and that's as functional as it gets. But he couldn't squat deep. He had to squat like, just above parallel, but he was fine. But he was smart enough to know if I try to squat deep, I'll end up with back pain. And so he trained according to his body, and that's what more people need to do. I train people for physique purposes, and probably my client out of here, this is Glute Lab, my gym, my #1 client out of here, Massa, she moved to Hawaii recently, but she can't squat deep, and she's got the best glute development. So obviously,
it's not a prerequisite.
It's not a prerequisite. People just need to find the variations that work best for them and stick with those, and you'll see better muscular results over time because, what I said earlier, pain inhibits muscle activation. It's going to make you worse over time, and you'll eventually hit a wall, and you'll be forced to take time off, and it's best to avoid that altogether.
Totally. I used to have really bad back pain from a sumo deadlift injury in college, and then started powerlifting 2 years ago. I was telling you offline. But prior to that, like I'd throw my back out pretty much every summer is guaranteed, and it would just lock up. But because I've been working on my glutes a lot more, like back pain, knock on wood, has basically gone away. So how do the glutes like really help people with functionality in life? But obviously there's the aesthetic component, which is great, but what are they doing like for the whole structure of the body?
Okay, so here's what I know. When people come to my gym and they have back pain, and we start training them, usually the very first session, their back pain goes away and it never resurfaces, okay? So I think there's 3 or 4 elements at play here. Firstly, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So earlier in my strength coach career, all I knew was biomechanics and structure and posture and things like that. You hurt your back deadlifting. Were you rounding or hyperextending?
Rounding.
Rounding.
Yep.
That's what I do too. I round. But I've learned how much I can round and get away with it. If I round too much, snap. It's an injury waiting to happen. But anyway, I don't teach that, because how do you teach someone? You've got 90 degrees of range of motion in the lumbar spine. I want you to limit it to 45. No, and even advanced lifters don't know what that means. You can't, okay, here's neutral, here's full flexion, here's 45 degrees. I won't let myself go past that.
Right.
So you try to teach people neutral, and then if you're a power lifter, you can assume more risk if you'd like. If you're a physique athlete, don't round. Or if you're an athlete using weight training to improve your sport, you don't round. But anyway, so a lot of them who come actually have hyperextension related back pain. We put them on the reverse hyper and the 45-degree hyper, and with hip thrusts and with everything, you'll see their chest comes up. They are hyperextending their spines, anteriorly tilting their pelvises, and we teach them how to not do that. So on the reverse hyper, I just touch their back. I say, I want the movement to come from the hips. Don't go higher than this. Don't arch here. On the back extension, we teach them, round your back. Let's practice moving through the hips. It's very hard for a lot of people to dissociate hip extension from spinal extension. They want to do them both together, and we force them, keep the back rounded, turns off the erectors, and now you're just using glutes and hamstrings. With the hip thrust, we say look forward, keep your head forward, rise up. This way, when your head is positioned forward, you can't hyperextend if you wanted to. And it teaches them not to hyperextend. Their back pain goes away. A lot of them will say, this is the first time I've finished a glute workout actually as planned. I didn't have to stop short because my back was hurting. And we've had about probably 5 different women with that experience. So, but also they could be getting it from flexion, from rounding with things, from usually with deadlifts, but like deadlifts, stiff leg deadlifts, they can't hold the arch as they descend, as they move into hip flexion. So we teach them that too. So if all you know is biomechanics, then you will conclude we teach them better form and their pain goes away. And I think that's probably 50% of it. less painful patterns than others, but biomechanics alone doesn't explain all of it. Another factor is glute strength. When you do have stronger glutes, your body isn't stupid. It uses them more. And this is why glutes can help with back injuries, hip injuries, hamstring strains, knee injuries, knee pain, things like that. Because if you have stronger glutes, your brain activates them more during movement. So just getting stronger glutes can help, but it's not sufficient alone, because it's not just having the stronger glutes, it's using those stronger glutes in movement. So you've got to coordinate it into your motor engram or motor program, which we do here because we're making them use good form. And then the third thing can be just a psychological thing. They come here, we're the glute lab. I'm the glute guy. I've got 500,000 Instagram followers. He's got a PhD. He must know what he's doing. And I'll tell you a quick story from 3 years ago when I was in Phoenix. I had a client come to me and she had had hamstring pain for seriously 10 years. She couldn't do any deadlifts or stiff leg deadlifts. It took her 30 minutes just to warm up for squats.
Wow.
And I said, okay, let's get on my glute ham developer. So the rounded pad.
Yeah.
And I rounded her over it so she's in hip flexion. And I just brought one leg up so she's in full knee flexion. And I said, try to resist me. And I pushed her leg down. So at the very bottom, she'd be in a very stretched position. And I think we did 4 or 5 reps, 2 sets, I think. And this was on a Thursday, I believe. And then the following Monday, I trained her and she's like, my hamstring is still so sore. And I was like, really? Okay, let's do it again lighter though. And she did again. So then the following Thursday, so 2 sessions of that. The following Thursday, she goes, Bret, something crazy happened. I don't feel any, my hamstring pain went away and I don't feel that inhibition anymore. I feel like I can deadlift. And I'm like, so she strained her hamstring in cheerleading when she was a collegiate cheerleader 10 or 15 years prior. I think it was 15 years prior. So she hadn't done a deadlift since. And if she tried, every time she tried, it hurt her. So she's like, I want to try deadlifts. I'm like, no. Yeah. Why? We're making good progress. Let's just be complacent and let's try to. And she's like, Bret, with all due respect, it's my body. I haven't deadlifted in so many years. I want to strike while the iron's hot. I want to go for it. And I'm like, okay, but if something bad happens, I'm going to tell you I told you so.
Yeah.
She ends up pulling 155 pounds for 2 reps.
Wow.
Then she grabs 50-pound dumbbells and does 10 reps with the stiff leg deadlifts. And I trained her until I moved, and it was a year later, and she had never, her hamstring pain never resurfaced. So what happened? Earlier in my career, I would have probably written an article for T-Nation and been like,
look at me.
I have the secret.
Yeah.
This manually resisted eccentric knee flexion in a hips flexed position, rounded over the glute ham raise, or the glute ham developer, is the special sauce for hamstring strain rehabilitation. And I speculate that it works by realigning the fibers, removing adhesions and scar tissue, improving trigger points, or whatever the hell structural biomechanical reason I had. But you want to know the truth? You can't make biomechanical improvements in a week and that quickly. She was okay. What was inhibiting her was her brain. It was still perceiving that to be a threat. Her tissue had healed up, but her brain didn't sense that. And I'm not a pain expert, but I do try to read up on pain and read guys like Laura Moore Mosley and people like that who do study this stuff. And I'm pretty sure all I did was she just has so much confidence in me because she thinks I'm this magician. I mean, there's research even on touch. When you get a massage, it helps if I make contact, if I patch on the back.
Right.
Stuff like that helps. So she had confidence in me, and it got her brain to accept to release the brakes and say, it's okay to go there. It's okay to do this. And if that's not a powerful story, I don't know what is, because 10 years of hamstring pain gone away in 1 week.
It's amazing.
And so I think there's a lot of that going on with weight training too. It's this confidence. It's this. It gets you to release the brakes. The brain says, I mean, that's what stretching does. That's what foam rolling does. It's not. Well, depends what labs research you read, but a lot of the stretching that we do, where it's not long-term, like long duration stretching, it's just working on the nervous system. You're not actually changing the tissue at all. You're not lengthening the tissue. You're not realigning fibers or changing the structure of it. You're just working on the nervous system to inhibit the inhibitors or stop the inhibition and potentiate the potentiators that let you go further. It's working on the muscle spindles and things like that, and maybe the Golgi tendon, things like that that allow you to go deeper without that pain sensation.
Oh, that's beautiful. I didn't know that we would get into mindset and things like that. But have you found that your hyper responders, your clients that really make sweeping changes in their physique, do they visualize more at night? Like I remember, did you read Lee Haney's book back in the day? I think it was a book on bodybuilding. And at night he would visualize his lagging body parts growing. So have you seen, because you've trained so many people over the years, I mean.
Funny you mentioned Lee Haney. I remember watching, he had an ESPN, like a workout on ESPN back in like, must be early 90s or late 80s maybe, but yeah, they would like lift weights on I think it was ESPN. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. But anyway, he was, I didn't know that about Lee Haney, but I did just recently write a post. I injured my glute and I was doing, and so anyway, I read all the research on it, on imagery, you know, mental imagery, and they'll call it imaginary contractions, you know, and so here's what the research says. You definitely see improvements through imagery training, and you especially see if you're injured, you will lose, like say you injured your shoulder and you couldn't do bench press, and it took 8 weeks for you to get better, and then you did bench press, you might lose, say, 40% of your strength. But if you were imagining bench pressing and doing like a little workout, then you would only lose 20%. You'd lose like half as much strength as what you would if you weren't doing it. And that's just preserving your nervous system coordination and all that stuff. It works on the nervous system. But when you imagine things, you see better results when you imagine it in a first person rather than a third person, I guess. I hope that's the right way, where like you imagine you doing the movements. You don't imagine watching you do the movement or someone else doing the movement. That leads to better results. However, they lead to improvements through slightly different adaptations, so it might be better to do both. It might be optimal to have some of it where you're imagining you going through the motions, but then also imagine watching yourself doing it, because it's complicated pathways and things like that. Yeah. But the other thing, so I started doing it, and here's the interesting thing: there's not a lot of research on this. So a lot of the rehab stuff, or not the rehab stuff, so there's a lot on like performance, whether it's like playing an instrument like piano or a skill like throwing darts or sports, you know, like diving or something. Well, I haven't read a lot of that, but I think there's a lot of research on improving performance that way. I was more interested in muscular performance. So let's say there was one study that looked at biceps, and you would imagine in like an isokinetic dynamometer doing an isometric contraction as hard as you can. And they do, I think it was like 10 seconds on, 10 seconds off for 5 straight minutes or something like that. Well, that's imagining a muscle. And in that study, it preserved it. That wasn't a rehab study. That was a immobilization study. So they just had one arm in a sling. They could sleep without the sling, but during waking hours, one arm would be in a sling. So this muscle would atrophy, and but it would prevent atrophy. And I think one study showed actual muscle growth, but not all the ones have showed. So it seems to work more on the the nervous system, but it could also have, and I don't know how, because you're not putting tension on the muscle, but anyway, it does prevent some of your muscular losses as well. So how the hell does that work? Because to stimulate hypertrophy or prevent atrophy, you have to be going through, you actually have to put tension on the muscle. Right. It can't just be imaginary. Nevertheless, it's interesting because I wanted, when I hurt my glute, I wanted to preserve my glute muscle and my strength with squats and deadlifts and hip thrusts. So I'm in uncharted territory. So as a researcher, I thought, well, what would be, in my mind, the best way? So I had times where I was envisioning the glute contract as hard as I can, like the biceps study, but I also envisioned doing actual squats, deadlifts, hip thrusts, and here's what was cool. You don't need to rest, but here's the deal. I would finish that 10 minute, I would do 10 minutes, like 12 minutes, and I'd be sweating. And I realized I also, I tried to make them as realistic as possible. So like for hip thrusts, I imagine the way it looks, like when you've got the bar on your lap, the way it looks, I know what it looks like from doing hip thrusts, the vision I see of my hips coming up, I can see it in my head, and I'd have different loads, but I'd be on my couch, like actually doing the reps, but I'm only using body weight, but in my mind it's 495. And then I do 585, but I'm probably only resting 15 seconds in between sets. I think you do need to rest a little bit because it is mentally taxing, but you don't have to recover metabolically. So you can squeeze in like 15 sets in 12 minutes, Then I'd picture squats and I'd actually go through the range. Now I couldn't go as deep because of my injury, but I would, in my mind, I'm going rock bottom, but I'm actually squatting down to what was comfortable. And same with deadlifts, and I'm like locking out, and I'm actually creating the intra-abdominal pressure, and I'm like grinding it out, feeling the way it would. And so when I did it that way, I would be sweating, my heart rate would be up, and you also feel yourself activating the muscles, and I think you see better results, according to the research, when you are activating the muscles a little bit. Well, when you have an injury, maybe you can activate a little bit, but not too much, but you don't want to be in pain while you're doing it. But anyway, fascinating. There's also research on the crossover effect with training one limb. If you're injured, you train the right limb, you will see some growth and strength gains on the left limb. The growth is not in all studies, but the strength is. There's a crossover effect where you might gain, 12% strength on the right arm and then like 5% on the left arm from just training the right arm. There's also, you can do, when you're injured, you can do isometric contractions and things like that. So that's the name of the game. In the long run, you always got to be doing stuff. Bed rest is never good. You want to be moving, you want to be lifting. When you first start exercising, as long as you have someone teach you good form, you don't have these little nagging injuries, but over time they accumulate. And at this point in time, there's rarely a week that goes by where everything feels great. It might be my shoulder one week, it might be my elbow another week, it might be my knee, my hip, whatever, a certain muscle, but you can always train around it. You can almost always do rows. You can always do like some light glute activation. And so people will be like, well, I haven't been in the gym. I have low back pain. Okay, you can do upper body. You can do your upper body, you can probably do some core exercises, maybe not, but you can do leg extensions, you can probably do seated leg curls, you might be able to do single leg body weight exercises. Do a set of 30 body weight Bulgarian split squats and tell me that doesn't work.
Right.
There's always stuff you can be doing.
Absolutely. So when you, after doing the visualization, was it like 4 or 5 weeks for your own glute injury? And then when you came back, how was your strength pre-injury, relatively?
Yeah, I was surprised at how strong I was right off the bat, especially my deadlifts.
That's amazing.
I know.
So how'd you hurt your glute? I haven't heard of glute injuries very frequently.
So there's no studies in the literature on it. It's like it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
But one night I was here and I felt the flu coming on, and I'm like, I know I'm getting sick, but I'm an idiot. We're all idiots, all of us meatheads. We make stupid decisions. I'm better than I was 20 years ago at it, but I still do. And I said, I wanted to do a heavy workout, but I'm not going to. I'm going to do a high rep, light workout. So I did 45-degree back extensions for like 3 sets of 30 or 2 sets of 30.
Weighted?
No, just rounded the way I do it for glutes. For glutes, you feel a lot more in your glutes when you turn the feet out and round the upper back. And then I did like extra range side-lying hip abductions. I actually do it off this bench, and it's like side-lying hip abductions but off a bench, so you can move a lot more range. That works the upper glutes. And then I did frog pumps for high reps. I think like 3 sets of 60 or something. And then I did the seated hip abduction machine, and for a couple sets of like 30. My glutes got an awesome workout. The next day, I woke up and I was sick, but I felt like a lump in my glute, like a hard, and it was swollen. And I was like, was that from that workout? It couldn't be from that workout. What is going on? I've never gotten like a boil or I'm like, what is it? Maybe it's a little minor muscle tear. But I got the flu and I didn't work out for a week. And then when I got better, I'm like, testing things out, and I realized, well, I did squats and deadlifts just fine. So my glute's not injured. I don't know what is going on, but my glute's fine because it would hurt if I was injured. Well, squats and deadlifts work the lower gluteus maximus a little more than the upper compared to other exercises. So I was fine with those. So I thought I was okay, but that lump was still there. So a few days later, I do a heavy hip thrust workout, and hip thrusts work the lower and upper very well. And I actually set a PR. I pushed it so hard, set a PR, and then like 30 minutes after the workout, I'm limping around. And I went in and got an MRI, and it was like, I posted on my Instagram, it's like torn in half. It was crazy. Wow. It's like, obviously the glute is a unique muscle. It's not like a hamstring where but you see this major tear all the way through. And I've always healed quickly. I'm a very fast healer with things, but 5 weeks later, I'm lifting again.
Wow.
And I'd like to get another MRI because I feel no lump anymore and I'm fine. But I was smart along the way. I did isometric contractions. I did the mental imagery training. I trained my right leg and not my left. But most importantly, I didn't do anything completely stupid and re-injure it. You got to let it heal and just do the right amount. That's the hard part.
It's hard. If you're dedicated like yourself, or if you're into this, it's a hard thing to not re-injure and let it heal.
Especially when you are warmed up, because your body lies to you. It's like, I'm fine, push it. You have to ignore that.
Yeah. That's amazing. Let's get into the hip thrust, because I think I think men underutilize this. Would you say? And why is that? Because I find that I love sumo deadlifts and squats and everything like that, but it's a great way to isolate the glutes, I feel like, and your erectors, and that's what I found. And my hamstrings, like I was telling you, we did this Saturday morning, my hamstrings are still sore. It's Wednesday today, right? Or Tuesday. Why are people, and maybe we can talk about how you did only hip thrusts. You did a study in the fall, I think, and your squat strength and deadlift strength did not decline.
Yeah. So let's go back to what I said earlier, when I was 16 years old. You read bodybuilding mags. They do body part splits. They have a leg day. You've got a chest and maybe a chest day. You've got a shoulder day. You've got an arm day. You've got a back day. You don't have a glute day. That's just assumed in leg day. But they'll say, I'm going to the gym to hit my quads and hams. They never said I'm going to train glutes. I never saw a single bodybuilder train their glutes specifically until I saw Kai Green doing it probably a decade ago. But until then, Vince Gironda, he was the Iron Guru. He was a popular trainer in the the 70s, and he trained a lot of high-level actors like Clint Eastwood and stuff like that. And he trained Arnold back in the day. But his philosophy was that if you do a lot of squatting and deadlifting and things like that, your glutes will get too overdeveloped. So that's why he recommended hack squats and things like that. So bodybuilders were never trying to maximize their glute growth. Back then, they liked symmetry and they didn't want too big of glutes. And then people's preferred physiques change over the years. If you study the history of ideal physiques in the 1700s, the idea of a healthy woman was heftier, you're more heavy set. You could look at the statue of David. That was the perfect physique back then, and well, he still has a great physique nowadays, but now people prefer more muscle, and then the glutes now are more popular, and now bodybuilders have big, huge shredded glutes as well. So times have changed since then, and now glutes are more popular, but I think that culture is still stuck. Like, guys don't, have you ever said, it's glute day?
No.
No.
Or I'm flexing my glutes in the mirror, check it out, guys. Yeah.
Now, women have no problem saying that. They love it. I want to train glutes every day. But men still have this weird, it's just some weird association with it. Like, we shouldn't talk about it. And I don't know if it's like some homophobic thing, or I have no idea. I guess I'd need to figure out how to research that to understand why. But it has always been this way, and it's changing a little bit. And we have more men that are, as it becomes more acceptable and more popular, why wouldn't you want the strongest glutes possible?
Yeah.
And the most muscular glutes possible. I'm still trying to get more muscular glutes and stronger glutes. But you're right, the women adopt it and accept it much quicker and to a much greater percentage than the men, and men should be doing it. But what you were saying earlier, you feel like it transfers. So in powerlifting, it's interesting because what are the best assistance lifts? So you will see the best results in powerlifting if you just do the 3 lifts, squats, bench, deadlifts, the way you do them in competition. That's specificity. But if training were all about specificity, you just do a mock meet every week. And you do 3 heavy singles with someone calling out commands, and that would be the best way to get stronger. But no one actually trains like that. You should be doing heavy singles, but you have to do it in a periodized fashion, and you do a little bit higher reps. You don't always just do singles. You do sets of 5s and 3s, and some portions of the year you might do sets of 10 if you're crazy for squats and deadlifts. That's brutal. But you also employ assistance lifts, and these are meant to build your main lifts. They're supposed to transfer to your main lifts. But it's the best assistance lifts depends on the individual. And from my experience, when you work with a lot of people, I've worked with a powerlifter who could do 3 bodyweight Bulgarian split squats. He was so strong in his good mornings and his deadlifts, and his squat was decent, but then his single leg strength, pathetic.
Wow.
So I had him do a steady diet of I prioritized single leg training for 2 months, and his squat and deadlift went through the roof because his leg strength was poor. I've also trained guys who have crazy leg strength, and they don't have good, they can squat, they always squat upright, but you try and get them to lean a little bit or do low bar squats, and they're not very good at them. They don't know how to lean, so you give those people good mornings and stiff leg deadlifts and box squats where they sit back, and that boosts their squat and deadlift strength. And then you have some guys who, the first time trying a hip thrust, they do 405 pounds for 5 reps. And then you have other guys who you go put a bar on their hips with 135 and they can't even get it up. And you're like, how do you squat 400 or 500 pounds and you can't do a 135 pound hip thrust? You take the bar away and they do body weight and they're like trembling at the top. So when I was in New Zealand for a year, for my first year of my PhD, I trained this guy. He was from Zimbabwe, this black guy. He was so muscular and jacked, and he was very strong. He did CrossFit, but he could, I think his squat was like 450 and his deadlift was like 500. And I gave him barbell glute bridges, and he couldn't lock out 135. He could barely get off the ground. And then I gave him a back extension, and I couldn't even give him weight. So at the top of a bodyweight glute bridge and the top of a back extension, he'd be trembling, like shaking. And you'd see his glutes contract so hard. So I just said, hey, the good news is you're really weak at these. You can bring them up quickly. These are very easy exercises. They're not hard on the body. Do these every day. Do these every day for 30 days. I want you to do, I think I had him do like 2 to 3 sets of bodyweight glute bridges every day and 2 to 3 sets of the back extensions where he squeezed the top. And I think he put 60 pounds on his deadlift that month.
Wow, that's incredible.
And then he loved me because, he put 60 pounds on. So we target his weak link. So does that mean you keep it's this, once you bring up your weak link to be normalized, then you don't get the same gains out of it. That's where you need to shuffle around. Like if you go do a Nordic ham curl and you sink like a ship, or can't do glute ham raises, and then you do them very frequently for a few weeks, and then then you shore up your hamstring strength, your deadlift goes up, but it doesn't keep going up linearly with increased glute ham raise strength. So it's about being in good balance, and everyone has different weak links. And the problem is people aren't very good at figuring out their weak links. That's where you need a good strength coach who knows all the lifts. You know, a lot of powerlifting coaches might know squats, deadlifts, and bench press like they're masters at them, but are they masters at single leg training, posterior chain training, the other upper body exercises? And that's why I've always been as a coach. I love powerlifting, I love bodybuilding, I love Olympic weightlifting, I love strongman, I love CrossFit, I love exercising in general, and I like studying it, and everything is a tool. And any good carpenter would want to have, he would want to have a big toolbox.
Yeah.
Yes, you're going to use your hammer and your screwdriver a lot more often than this specialty tool here, but throughout the year you will use this specialty tool 10 times on this client, and it's going to be a game changer.
Such a good point. Yeah. So a few follow-up questions on that. Some people say loading up your hips like this, that your spine is not made to handle those transverse loads. What would you say to that?
Well, I've heard that, and it's silly, because if that were the case, the hip thrust is now, it's going on 13 years old. It's 12 and a half years old.
Yeah.
And so I would be all jacked up. I have people who've been doing it. And a lot of the trainers that I influenced early on have been giving it to their clients for 10 years. All our clients here at Glute Lab that have been here all year would be all jacked up. And it's funny because I hear people talking about, if you want to scare people, just talk about shear loading, because no one understands shear loading. And it's like, okay, you have compressive loads and shear loads, and they'll put some picture of a spine and talk about how the spine can't handle shear, and it's like, and then people freak out. And it's like, you guys, you don't just study the biomechanics. You look at what goes on in the actual gym, and no one hurts themselves with hip thrust done properly. Glute Lab is a year, and well, we started training clients in January of last year, but we actually opened up for business like just I think a week or two ago, this time last year.
Nice.
We've had 0 injuries.
Amazing.
The trainers have hurt themselves because we're idiots, but the clients, 0 injuries.
Yeah.
And we have everyone hip thrust. And you can see here, we've got booty builder, glute builder, hip thruster, Smith machine, Nautilus glute drive, and the Scorcher. We've got 6 different hip thrusting machines, but they're also you'll always, during open hours, they're over here doing frog pumps and glute bridges and knee banded glute bridges and different single leg hip thrusts, and they're doing all different types of hip thrusts. We do more reps of hip thrusts out of here than any other gym, and no one has hurt themselves. And on the contrary, they feel better. They feel better than before they started doing them. So that's an unfounded fear. The spine and pelvis can handle that load very well, but you do need thick bar padding, and you can see we have them on all the different barbells. We've got different bar padding that makes it feel nice and comfortable.
That's what I found from
that'll hurt
yoga
the hips.
mat.
You can roll up a yoga mat, but the best are these thick, dense bar pads. We have the Hampton, the squat sponge, the RX balance pad, and then the different knockoffs of that, and that's individual too, because some people will love the RX and the others hurt, and some people love the Hampton. It's kind of funny. And even with the hip thrust stations, some people love the booty builder, some people don't. Some people love the Nautilus glute drive. Some people, my hip thruster is their favorite way to hip thrust, and it's you know how I tell who's a real trainer and who actually works with people? By whether or not they say black and white statements, like everyone should squat this way, or everyone should hip thrust this way, because it's all over the board. We take, say we have 200 clients here, 30 of them, maybe 50 of them, the booty builder would be their favorite way to hip thrust, but 30 of them would not like it at all. And that's the same way with high bar back squats, deep, it's the same way. Again, to keep repeating this theme is you gotta individualize your training.
I love that approach. Now, have you found different trainers? Because I get this question a lot. How do I find a good trainer? I know NASM tries to have a different open-minded approach. You're a CSCS in addition. If someone's listening and they don't live in San Diego or aren't going to travel here, how can they find someone that has an open mindset like you?
This will ruffle some feathers, but I'm on the board of directors right now for the NSCA. So I'm not speaking for the NSCA here. This is my own thoughts. I'm sure a lot of people would disagree with me. But in my experience, the gold standard is a CSCS, but that's the best certification in my opinion right now. That's from NSCA. But even with that, you could just be a good test taker. You got to get a college degree, read, take this test, and you could pass and not have much gym experience. You need to, like my trainers here, they interned for a couple of years at what was it, UConn? UConn, where'd you guys intern?
Yeah.
UConn. They interned under an awesome strength coach. They learned the ropes. They've been living and breathing this for years before they came to me, and then I trained them for a few months before we opened.
Wow.
And then we worked out together. I taught that, So ACSM, there's ACSM, and in my experience, they're the American College of Sports Medicine, but they focus a little more on cardiovascular things, and they should have a bigger weight training component to their education. Like I've spoken for them, and I do practicals, and it's like very rare, I think. I wish they focused more on strength training. NASM focusing on strength training, but NASM was founded by a physical therapist. He created that model. Michael Clark.
The CPT model or whatever.
The OPT model.
Oh, the OPT, yeah.
And the OPT model to me is silly. It's this pyramid, and it says you start at stabilization, endurance, and then you have your like hypertrophy and strength and power. It's a pyramid, and it's a little more complicated than that, but you cycle through those. And why would you start people off with unstable surface training? I couldn't imagine if everyone in here, we brought in new clients and we all start them off with unstable surface training. You start them off, you need them getting better at squats, you start them off with stable squats. Yeah. The lifts are hard enough to learn as is. You don't need to add an instability component to it. So and exercise like single leg RDLs, but people, this is about making the most fit individuals, and you got to think long term, and you want them to grow muscle and have physique adaptations. Most people are coming in for physique adaptations,
right.
But you also want to get them strong and functional. So that's on us to do that. So what's the best way possible? I don't think I think the NASM needs to revamp their OPT model. It's outdated. At the time, it was kind of revolutionary, cool, I like this, but since then we have research. And also I'm friends with all the best coaches in the world, and I don't know a single one that does that. And that's not to say maybe you couldn't see decent results, I just think you could see better results. Also, the power phase. My clients want physique results. If you stop giving them hypertrophy work, like we're going to quit giving you hypertrophy work, and you're doing a whole month with all power exercise and plyometrics and things like that, you will lose muscle during that time. So I'm a big fan of like conjugated training, concurrent training. Like you can do power. You don't just omit everything. It's blended together, and you only do plyos and power exercise if they want that adaptation. Do you want to be more explosive and get really good at your vertical jump, for example? Is that a goal of yours? No. So why would I give you that?
Right.
Especially because some of them can be dangerous, but also I have my clients for an hour. The whole hour I want them focusing on their main goal. And that's not to say you ignore like their function and their health and all that. I just think that model needs to be improved upon. And I'd be happy to help them improve upon it. So would my friend Brad Schoenfeld and James Krieger.
I saw him last week, actually. He
Really?
lives in my area, yeah.
Oh yeah,
he's at the
Seattle,
pro club.
Yeah.
It's fun.
These guys they're my best friends, and they know the hypertrophy literature like the back of their hand. They know it like I know the glute research. So I love calling them when I'm going to make this post. Can you read over this and make sure I'm good. I'm not saying anything wrong, you know. And
Right.
they're just such good people. But yeah, but that's not to say that even the NSCA textbooks, for example, it's so you can only come up with a textbook so often. We have all these exercises that aren't shown in that textbook. What we've learned about program design we've learned some things since that was published, and so that's why getting a certification is great for several reasons. Number one, it shows that, like, I'm proud to say I'm a PhD and a CSCS with distinction. I go that extra mile because, to me, the CSCS is the gold standard for a strength coach. But it doesn't stop there. You got to be, I always say, your knowledge is a pie chart of three things. 33% of it has to do with lifting yourself. You lift weights, but you don't just do the same workout every year for 10 straight years. You won't learn much if you do that. You got to be experimenting with different exercises, different program designs, different programs that are popular. Have you run Shiko and Smolov and the Russian squat program? Have you tried 531? Have you tried Westside? I learned so much from trying these different programs. Have you trained like a bodybuilder? Have you tried, powerlifting? Have you tried focusing on single leg strength for a couple months? Experiment on yourself, and that's a third of your knowledge. But if that's all you did, you would know a lot about how your body works, and then you'd go tell everyone, just do the things the way I do it. That's why the other third, or another third of your knowledge, comes from working with others, from all walks of life. Young people, old people, male, female, beginners, advanced, people with different goals, physique goals, strength goals, from different sports, from different disciplines. Now we're talking. You train all those types of people, overweight, skinny people trying to gain weight, overweight people trying to lose weight. You work with all these types of people, and now that represents the other third. And then the final third, because just being in the gym, you get really good at coaching exercise and writing good programs, but you don't get good at understanding things. And how are you going to revolutionize anything if you don't know the science? So that other third comes from reading and listening to podcasts and watching videos and attending conferences. And that's where the certification comes into play, because you have to get recertification credits, CEUs, and so you end up attending a conference. You can make like-minded friends to talk shop with, because that's huge. 15 years ago, I didn't have anyone. I didn't know. I was just my own little island. I didn't know anyone. I had no friends in the industry. I had guys I looked up to that I read about, but I didn't have their phone number. And now I have all their phone numbers. I wonder something, I can just give them a call, and that's so valuable. And I've made friends with the top people in the field, the top experts, and we collaborate together. And that's taken my knowledge to the next level. So awesome. You should be doing all three of them to maximize your knowledge and understanding of strength and conditioning. And in addition, you need to be humble and not have this Dunning-Kruger effect to think that you know it all. And you have to be open-minded and skeptical. And those two things seemingly oppose each other, but they don't. You should always be skeptical of new things coming out, because probably 80% of anything new you hear is BS. It's pseudoscience. So always be skeptical, but also be open-minded. Because the second you think you really know something, a new paper gets published and you didn't. So 30% of what I've said today is wrong or incomplete. And if I watch this same interview 10 years from now, I'd be going, ugh.
Oh, why was I saying that?
That's cringeworthy.
Yeah, I mean, that's with anything, right? I mean, we learn more. We have better ways of assessing and measuring things as technology improves and all that sort of stuff. But speaking of which, so we kind of mentioned, like you were talking about how Flex Magazine or Muscular and Development, right? If you were to open that up, what would make you happy if they had a split in there, like leg day, glute day? Because I think a lot of people want to know volume, frequency, and all that. And you have your insider program, which I'll link below, which is great. But for the average person just listening now, so you're going to train glutes today and then quads tomorrow, I think you said. So how would that split look for you?
Okay, well, for me, I wouldn't, because what I do is always like this flowing work around it's very complicated how I train. But I would say for the masses, I would have a different split for males versus females. But for the men, I would want them splitting up their leg day into 2 days. So you have a quad day that you also throw in glutes, and then a hamstring day where you also throw in glutes. And I think they'd see better results that way. So for example, instead of here's a typical bodybuilder leg day, squats, hack squats or leg press, maybe some lunges, and then leg extensions. Okay, that's quads. Then for hamstrings, it's usually stiff leg deadlifts and either lying leg curls or seated leg curls. All right? And yes, you will work your glutes doing squats and lunges and stiff legs, but you won't develop them to the maximum. If instead you had a leg day where you did squats or front squats, and then maybe like hip thrusts or glute bridges, and then maybe leg extensions and maybe like a single leg exercise like Bulgarian split squats, something like that. Leg extensions I tack on at the end. And then maybe an abduction exercise. And then for hamstrings, maybe that was Monday, and then on Thursday you train the hamstrings and you do, say, deadlifts or stiff leg deadlifts or Romanian deadlifts, and then maybe you do back extensions, because those work the glutes very, very well. And then, maybe some type of leg curl, and then maybe like the seated hip abduction machine. And one day the abduction is frontal plane, straight out to the side, and the other is transverse, where you're bent over, because they work slightly different subdivisions. Then you've got, then you split up the upper body into 3 days. So say it was Monday, quads and glutes, Tuesday, chest and tris, Wednesday, back and bis, Thursday, hams and glutes, Friday, delts. That would be a good, and then on delt day, you throw in a little more upper back stuff too. But anyway, that would be a good.
You'd be excited. You'd be like, dude,
yeah, I'd be like, we're making progress. That would be better. And then for women, a lot of the bikini and physique, I write programs for people. That's one thing I do, personalized programming. And a lot of these ladies want to train their glutes very frequently. I'm having to fight them. They want to train glutes every day. Some get requests 7 days a week, full body. And I'm like, could you imagine doing full body 7 days a week? You'd just be destroyed. You wouldn't make progress. So I'll try and convince them, okay, for those types, I'll say, are you open-minded doing 6 days? Because you need at least 1 day of complete rest. But and then the 6 days, I'll go, I call it the compound bro system. Monday, Wednesday, Friday I give them the stuff they want. I give them the good stuff, the heavy lifts, But then on Tuesday and Thursday and Saturday, I call it the bro stuff, like high rep, more single joint pump stuff, where it's not going to crush them. And that way you can train full body 6 days a week. But if you try to do squats and deadlifts and lunges and bench and dips and military press and incline press, you try and do those every day, you'll spin your wheels, you'll be trashed. So, but what's better, I think the best split for women, first of all, we could talk about all the different types of ways to train. Body part splits are the most common. They're the most popular worldwide. There's probably the next most popular is full body training, but there's also upper lower, and then there's push pull. Those are the main ones. So you got all these different ways to lift weights. And what I like about push pull is that you're training glutes every day. But one day is like pushing movements, but like squats and then like upper body presses. And then the next day it's pulling movements, so like deadlifts, but then pulling upper body exercise. So you can still train glutes every day. But upper lower is awesome too. And I like women to focus on, because a lot of my ladies, they're so strong with their glutes, and then I go to say, let's see you do a chin-up, and they can't do a chin-up. Or I'll give them the barbell and say, let me see you do military press, and they squeak out 3 to 5 reps. Like, I want you getting that for 20 reps. Oh, you should be able to do the bar for 20 reps. Obviously, it depends on your weight, but I give them a goal to work for. They're all great, and you can see great results with every one of them, but there are rules to each one, how to make it more effective. And so I do love full body training. So for women, I like 3 full body days, but the problem is a lot of women want to work out more than just 3 days. But I really do think you see awesome results. And even with upper body, imagine if you did chin-ups or like inverted rows 3 days a week. Your back would get very strong. Imagine if you did bench press or military press 3 times a week. You would get very strong. And then, but it's 3 days a week, so you're still recovering. So if they're okay with training 3 days a week, then that's great. But if they want a little bit more, then you add in, you sprinkle in some of the, like on this, on Tuesday, do a delta and glute, like high reps, so it doesn't burn you out for the following day. You're just trying to focus on quality. You're never going for PRs or progressive overload those days. And that tends to work well.
Can the lower body handle more volume and frequency than the upper body? Are the muscles fibers different and things like that?
I think that was like the common thought back in the day, and I'm pretty sure research is showing otherwise. That you might need a little more time to recover, but actually that's mixed. I can think of other studies, but I think it depends on how you do it, and how, obviously the exercise selection, how hard you train, like your proximity to muscular failure. So exercises that work you in a stretch position and have a big eccentric component to them, like squats and lunges and stiff leg deadlifts, those are going to create more muscle damage and tax you more than exercise that work you in shortened positions, like lying leg curls and leg extensions and hip thrusts and glute bridges. So think of doing band work for your glutes. You never go into a stretch. It's hardest in the shortened position. You can do high reps. They don't crush you. You could do them every day a little bit and you'd be fine. Try and do a heavy set of walking lunges to failure every day, and it beats you up. So people need to learn more about the biomechanics of the individual exercise, and then that determines your recovery and how often you should train, and then how to set up an optimal program.
That's such a good point. One thing we hear about with deadlifting and squatting is a hormonal benefit, like growth hormone increases, testosterone, all that. Do you think hip thrust, because it's so much load, the same? I don't know if there's been studies, but
so that's called the hormone hypothesis, and it's pseudoscience. So and we all did it back in the day. This was just every coach. I did it for 10 years. You want bigger arms, squat and deadlift, because it's going to increase your testosterone and your growth hormone, and you're going to get jacked all over. That's what we all said, okay? And then the main researcher that busted this bro science was Stu Phillips, and he started coming up with these studies showing, yes, you are increasing your testosterone and growth hormone and cortisol. All these hormones go up, but it doesn't affect your biceps. It only affects the muscles being worked. So who cares? You don't do them for your arms or for other things. And also the elevations are transient. So you might have a quick, for 1 hour, a spike, but then it can dip down. So throughout the course of a day, it doesn't make much difference. And if you train super hard, you can actually, if you're always trying to do compound lifts with progressive, and you do too much of it, you actually will have lower testosterone levels than your optimal levels, because you're always, that's why it's important to fluctuate your training stress into deload every once in a while to allow for full recovery and for everything to get back to optimal levels.
I didn't know that was debunked. Yeah, interesting. That's really good. All right, so let's create a hypothetical situation here. So this building, the zombie apocalypse, where it's burning down, what one piece of equipment are you taking with you? And of all of this, because you have some amazing stuff here.
I mean, it would have to be the barbell. You can do so much with a barbell. But for beginners, I don't like the barbell so much. I like dumbbells more for them, and body weight dumbbells, bands. But I'm a fan of everything. I love kettlebells. I love machines. I love apparatuses. So if you said, does the power rack, is that one piece of equipment? Because with that, you can do everything. So much off of it. You can do chin-ups. You can do, dips. You can do, if you have a bench on there, you can do bench press, squats, deadlifts, good mornings, lunges, rows, so much. But I see what you're getting. I'm cheating here. Like if it was what machine would I take? Probably, this is going to be a shameless plug, but I just started selling it. I call it the BCT bell. Now, it's just a loading pin. I started doing these in my mid-20s.
I bought one.
You bought one?
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. And you can do it like a squat, you can do it like a deadlift, you can do it like a blend, but you do it elevated, you get a deep stretch. It's probably my favorite overall lower body exercise if you could only do one. And that would be one tool that I would really like to take because it's small, but you'd have to have the plates. You'd have to have the plates with it, but that's one piece of equipment I think is so important.
Right, especially at home. Like if you already have a squat rack at home and you have the plates, it makes it easy to do like goblet squats or even one-legged. I've been doing a lot, but mostly sitting down, trying to get deeper for me personally. That's my weak point, getting out of the hole. And that's very, very affordable. I want to say it was like $119 or something. Like it was really, for a home gym, it's great. So you have a lot of coaching online as well. You have a lot of free, great stuff on your Instagram account. I'm sure a lot of people watching this already follow you. But what are some of the benefits of becoming an insider? Because I know you have like a membership program, a lot of workouts and everything like that.
Well, like my Booty by Bret program, that's $29.99 a month. And I pride myself on, it's not recycled material. Most of the people you buy programs from, they film an exercise once and then the next month they'll say, here's your program, and they link to this video they already filmed. I film new videos every month, and it's like, and I write new programs every month based on what we're learning here. We are always experimenting in the gym. So I have an actual lab, an actual gym where we experiment, and we're gonna throw this into the program. So it's cutting edge stuff that we're doing here. It's always the most up-to-date stuff that we're actually doing, and I film a new video each month where I go through and go through the workout, and we're always doing variations of squats and deadlifts and hip thrusts and lunges and bench press and chin-ups and things like that. But we tweak the variations, the tempos, the volume, the sets and reps and all this stuff, and the exercise order. We have a different focus. And for that reason, it's a really good program because it's something new every month. It's not boring, and I think we talked about the psychological and the buy-in component. You need to not be bored. Maybe the best way to see results is to do 5x5 on these 5 exercises. Bench, squat, deadlift, military press, chin-up, or row. But I would quit lifting if I had to do that every week.
Right.
After a few years, I'd be like, this is just so boring. You got to mix it up. You got to change stuff around so you feel excited. And I pride myself on writing effective workouts that are fun and will deliver results. And it includes all the latest stuff.
That's really cool. Yeah, I'll put a link to that program below here.
Thank you.
So the Glute Lab, I envision this. Are you guys going to like franchise and bring this outside of San Diego, or what's your long-term goal with that?
Everyone's asking me that, and I want to do it, but how the hell do I franchise this when like my coaches are so smart? I told you, they came to me with so much knowledge. How do you systematize it, if that's a word? How do you
replicate it?
How do I replicate this to the average? So there would have to be a certification process, and then the franchising paperwork seems really daunting, but I know it's been done before. The thing is, we're not like a curves model where you need a minimum wage person to just sit there and then people just rotate around 10 machines. Our system requires good equipment and expertise, but there does seem to be a lot of demand, and I think I could pull it off. It's just, I'm finishing up a book right now. After the book, then I'll tackle that. But I would like, how cool would it be to have Glute Lab in Seattle, Glute Lab San Francisco, LA, Manhattan, New York, Florida, Miami, Chicago, Toronto, Sydney, London. It would just be great. So maybe, it's just, I don't want to, if I go that route, I want it to be like you can count on getting consistent. Like you could go to all the different Glute Labs and you'd get a similarly awesome workout. I don't want to cheapen it and have just everyone
watered down, cookie cutter.
I'm thinking about it, but it just seems daunting.
Yeah, with all you have going on. So the book, when does that come out?
That's coming out in a few months, and it's called Glute Lab, and it's. I wrote it with this Glenn Cordoza. He wrote Supple Leopard with Kelly Starrett, but so I wanted to team up with him because he's a best-selling author.
Nice.
And he's so good, and what's awesome is he doesn't fight me on things. He wants to be comprehensive. So when I think of something new, we add it to the book. So they always say this in the industry, well, you buy a book, it's already 2 years old. This book will be done in like 2 months, and it'll probably be being sold in like 4 months. It'll be, you can pre-order it right now on Amazon. It's called Glute Lab, but it'll be 2 months. It'll include the stuff that I was doing here in the gym 2 months prior. So we're working on it, tweaking it all the way up until it goes to print.
Sweet.
And we've been working on it for 15 months already.
Wow. It's
really comprehensive, and I'm so proud because it really tried to include my whole system. It's going to be a lot of pages, a lot of pictures, but I'm so proud of it already, and it's not even done.
That's so cool. So it'll be like Supple Leopard, a lot of pictures and diagrams, things like that. Are you guys self-publishing, or you have a publisher?
No, it's through Victory Belt. The same.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, they do such a good job with the layout and okay. Have they done a fitness book before? I don't think they have.
They did Supple Leopard.
Oh, they
did my book Strong Curves too.
Okay, cool.
But what's cool is you keep getting better. So they've learned things since Strong Curves, since Supple Leopard. They keep improving, and they have a better team, better like graphics team, better marketing team, better everything. So I'm hoping this book really reaches the masses worldwide, and that all these techniques and exercises and strategies that we've really fine-tuned here in the Glute Lab here in San Diego reach the rest of the world. That's just so cool to me.
That's awesome. Yeah, you're leaving a legend. That must feel cool at night. Like you're like, wow, you're impacting so many people. Your engagement. There's so many fitness celebs on Instagram, but your engagement, your shares. I think you were in a hotel gym in Bend, Oregon, 32,000 saves on that one. That's insane.
And that was because I couldn't sleep. It was like one in the morning, and I'm like, maybe I should just film a little glute workout here. And I'd post it like 1:30 in the morning, and then wake up to like all these. It's just, Instagram's so interesting, you know. Everyone thinks I've got this master plan. I'm going to post something today. I don't know what I'll post. I don't know what I'll post tomorrow. I just wing it every single day. And then you learn what works, what doesn't. It's just an interesting animal.
That's awesome. Brett, thanks so much for coming on. Keep up the great work.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right, thanks so much for tuning in, guys. I'll put links to the book and also Brett's website as well. And if you like this video, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and if you're not already, please go follow Brett over on Instagram. Thanks for tuning in.